Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we're diving into something really important: economic mobility and resilience in America.
Hmm.
And what's interesting is our main source for this is, believe it or not, the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta.
Yeah, they do a lot of research on this.
So we're going to be looking at some of their findings, and see why this is something that really matters to all of us.
Yeah, for sure. I think sometimes these topics can seem uh, a bit academic,
Right.
but when you really dig into it, it's like, wow, this affects everybody, even if you don't think you're, struggling financially.
Totally. And they actually have a stat in here that really kind of blew my mind. It said that a child who's born into a family, in that bottom 20% income bracket
Okay.
only has a 4% chance of ever reaching the top 20%,
Whoa.
which is pretty crazy when you think about it.
That's a tiny percentage.
It is, and it really kind of sets the stage for what we're going to be talking about today.
It really makes you question that whole American dream narrative, doesn't it?
Right.
So maybe a good place to start would be just to kind of break down these concepts a bit.
Okay.
What exactly do we mean by economic mobility and resilience,
Yeah.
in a practical sense? Like, why should we care?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have kind of a general sense of what those terms mean, but I'm curious to hear how the Atlanta Fed kind of defines them specifically.
Yeah, so they describe economic mobility as essentially the ability to improve your economic situation over time.
Okay.
Moving up that income ladder, having more opportunities to earn, build some wealth,
Right.
achieve a better standard of living for yourself, for your family.
Yeah.
And resilience is kind of the flip side of that. It's about uh, being able to weather those inevitable financial storms, job loss, unexpected expenses,
Mm-hmm.
just setbacks that life throws your way. It's
Yeah.
that ability to bounce back.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But I think, a lot of people would argue that, um, it's just about individual hard work.
Sure.
Like you make smart choices, you work hard, and you can kind of get ahead.
Right.
So what does the Atlanta Fed's research kind of have to say about that?
Well, that's where things get really interesting
Okay.
because they're saying, yeah, individual effort matters, absolutely,
Right.
but it's often not enough to overcome some of these really deep-rooted systemic barriers that are in
Ooh,
place. And they point to factors like, your family's wealth, the neighborhood you grow up in,
Right.
even race as having this huge impact on your economic trajectory, regardless of how talented or how hardworking you might be as an individual.
Wow.
Yeah, this study, I think it was in, I want to say it was like 2018,
Okay.
where they found that children who grow up in poor neighborhoods,
Mm.
with low-performing schools,
Mm-hmm.
they're significantly less likely to move up that economic ladder, no matter how much effort they put in.
So are they basically saying that, like, it's kind of a rigged game from the start?
It's not a level playing field, that's for sure.
Right.
Like you dealt a certain hand at birth, and it can be incredibly difficult to change your fate no matter how hard you try.
Exactly.
And then you layer on top of that, um, all the historical policies
Right.
that have systematically disadvantaged certain groups,
Yeah.
and you can really start to see how these inequities become so deeply entrenched.
Right. Because it's like, even if you're doing everything right, you're working hard, you're making good choices, there are still all these other factors kind of working against you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, for example, discriminatory housing practices in the past.
Yeah.
That's led to concentrated poverty in a lot of communities,
Mm-hmm.
limited access to resources, especially for people of color.
Right.
And those effects, they linger. They impact everything from educational opportunities to job prospects to just overall well-being.
It's like we're talking about multiple economies within America. Some that are thriving and others that are kind of trapped in this cycle of poverty and lack of opportunity.
That's a great way to put it. It's like, imagine you have a sports team, right?
Okay.
And only some of the players have access to like proper training or equipment.
Right.
The team as a whole is going to suffer,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you have all this untapped potential sitting on the sidelines.
Right.
And it's the same thing with our economy. When we have entire communities that are held back by these systemic barriers, it limits our overall economic growth.
So they're kind of debunking that whole, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality.
Yeah, they're pushing back against that individualistic narrative.
Okay.
They're saying, look, individual effort's important,
Right.
but it's not enough to address these really deep-rooted issues of inequality.
Mm.
We have to acknowledge that the playing field is tilted,
Yeah.
and we need to start thinking about solutions
Yeah.
that address these systemic problems.
So I'm starting to see why the Atlanta Fed is so interested in this issue. But what can they actually do about it? I mean, I always think of the Fed as, dealing with monetary policy,
Sure.
like setting interest rates and stuff like that.
Right.
How does that connect to all of this?
Well, that's what's so interesting about their approach.
Yeah.
They're actually leveraging all their research capabilities and regional partnerships to try to understand and address these really complex challenges.
Okay.
So, for example, they've developed this, it's called the Community Development Tool,
Mm-hmm.
which basically analyzes economic data at the neighborhood level.
Wow.
So they can actually pinpoint areas where investment and support are most needed.
So they're using data to really target their efforts.
Exactly. And they're also working with local organizations, businesses, policymakers
Right.
to create more inclusive economic opportunities. They're recognizing that this is a problem that requires collaboration,
Mhm.
a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see how they're going beyond just like the traditional economic policy tools
Yeah.
to really address these kind of deeper societal issues.
It's all connected,
Right?
And it really ties back to their mandate, which is to maximize employment.
Right.
They understand that a strong, thriving economy depends on having as many people as possible participating in meaningful, good-paying jobs.
Makes sense.
But to do that, we have to break down these barriers.
Right.
We have to create a system that allows everyone to reach their full potential.
Okay. So I definitely want to dig more into, the specifics of what they're doing and how we can all be a part of this.
Absolutely.
All right. So we've talked about how important economic mobility and resilience are, but we've also kind of highlighted how the system's not exactly set up for everyone to succeed equally.
Right.
So what are some specific things the Atlanta Fed is actually doing to try to tackle this problem?
Well, one area they're really focusing on is affordable housing.
Okay.
They've done a ton of research showing
Yeah.
the link between stable and affordable housing and overall economic well-being.
So it's not just about, like, having a roof over your head.
Right. It's about having that foundation to build a better life,
Yeah, so how are they actually addressing that? Are they, like, building houses?
Not directly,
Okay.
but they are working with developers and community organizations, policymakers,
Right.
to really promote policies that encourage more affordable housing development.
Okay.
And they've even created what they call a housing opportunity index,
Okay.
which basically tracks affordability trends across different regions.
Wow.
So they can see where the need is greatest.
That's smart. So using data to, like, drive action and make sure resources are allocated effectively.
Exactly. And another big area for them is workforce development.
Okay.
So, they've partnered with a lot of local businesses, training programs to create those pathways for people to get the skills they need for these, like, in-demand jobs.
Right, because, like, having the right skills is huge.
Absolutely. And one example I thought was really cool is their support for coding boot camps.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which provide, intensive training in software development, which is a field, that has really, really high earning potential.
That's awesome. So it's like they're not just looking at this big picture. They're really getting down to, like, the individual level of helping people, get what they need to succeed.
Yeah, they're trying to connect the dots.
You're right.
And they're also, working to address this issue of financial literacy. They offer, like, workshops and resources to help people understand basic financial concepts,
Right.
like budgeting, saving, investing, because they recognize that financial knowledge is a key part of building that resilience.
Right. You can't make good decisions if you don't understand, like, the basic.
Exactly. It's kind of like, we're not just going to give you a fish.
Right.
We're going to teach you how to fish.
I like that. So they're really empowering people to take control of their own financial futures.
That's the goal. And then, they're also looking at the role of entrepreneurship,
Okay.
in driving economic mobility.
Right, because small businesses, those are a huge part of the economy.
Absolutely. So they've launched all these initiatives to support small businesses and entrepreneurs, especially in, underserved communities.
Right.
Because they're, really the engines of job creation and economic growth.
Yeah. This all sounds really promising, but it's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed by the scale of this.
Sure.
Like, what can the average person, listening to this, what can we do?
Oh, that's such a great question. And the Atlanta Fed really emphasizes the importance of collective action here.
Okay.
There are so many ways to get involved.
Right.
Even small actions can make a difference.
Yeah. Okay, so like where do we even start?
Well, one of the most impactful things is supporting those organizations that are out there on the ground. Working to promote economic opportunity in your community.
Right.
There are so many nonprofits, charities, community groups, that are dedicated to this.
Yeah.
And you can, volunteer your time, donate money, or even just spread the word about the work they're doing.
That's a great point. And that's something that, anyone can do regardless of their, their financial situation or whatever.
Exactly.
What about engaging with our elected officials?
Yes.
Is that something that to make a difference?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let your representatives know that this is an issue you care about.
Okay.
Advocate for policies that support, affordable housing, quality education, job training, small business development. These are all critical investments in our collective future.
It's about holding our leaders accountable and making sure they're prioritizing the right thing.
Exactly.
Right.
And, don't underestimate the power of your everyday choices.
Oh, okay. Like what?
Well, supporting local businesses,
Yeah.
especially those owned by people from underrepresented groups.
Right.
That can have a real, direct impact on economic mobility in your community.
Yeah.
It's about putting your money where your values are.
I love that. It's such a simple thing, but it can actually make a difference.
It all adds up.
Yeah, it reminds us that we're not just like passive consumers.
Right.
We actually have the power to shape things.
Exactly. Now, what about, if you're someone who has, maybe some financial resources to invest,
Okay.
have you considered impact investing?
Oh, I've heard about that.
Yeah, it's basically investing in businesses or organizations that are committed to social impact.
Okay.
So, you can grow your wealth and also contribute to a more just and equitable society at the same time.
It's a win-win.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And finally, we can't forget the power of education.
Okay.
The more informed we are about these issues,
Right.
the better equipped we are to advocate for change.
Right. Knowledge is power. Right.
It really is. So, read those books and articles, research reports, attend workshops, lectures, engage in thoughtful conversations with your friends, your family, your colleagues.
Yeah.
Because the more we understand about these issues,
Right.
the better equipped we'll be to actually dismantle these systems and create a more just and equitable future.
Right. Because if you don't understand the problem, you can't really fix it.
Exactly.
Wow, you've given us a lot to think about. I mean, it sounds like the Atlanta Fed is really trying to change the whole conversation around economic mobility and resilience.
Yeah, they really are. They're challenging us to, move beyond these simplistic ideas about individual responsibility
Right.
and acknowledge that there are these systemic factors at play that perpetuate inequality. And they're showing that, even a traditionally economics-focused institution like the Fed, they can play a vital role in creating a more just and equitable society.
One thing that really struck me throughout this whole deep dive is how economic mobility and resilience aren't just abstract concepts. They have these really tangible impacts on people's lives.
Yeah, for sure.
Think about the difference it would make for a family to have access to affordable housing,
Right.
or quality childcare, job training programs that actually allow them to earn a living wage. Those are game changers.
Exactly. It's about creating a system that gives everybody a chance to actually thrive, not just, barely scrape by.
Right.
When people have that stable foundation, they can invest in their education.
Right.
They can start businesses.
Yeah.
They can contribute to their communities in all these amazing ways.
It's like this ripple effect.
Yeah, it benefits everybody in the end.
It seems like what they're trying to do is shift the narrative from one of, scarcity and competition to one of abundance and collaboration.
Yeah.
They're saying when we invest in people, when we invest in communities,
Right.
we all benefit in the long run.
Exactly. They're really highlighting how interconnected everything is, our economy and our society.
Yeah.
When one segment of the population is struggling, it holds everybody back. But when we create opportunities for everyone to succeed, we unlock this huge amount of potential.
Right.
And that makes for a more prosperous and vibrant society for everybody.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that economic mobility and resilience, they're essential.
Okay.
They're essential for a thriving society.
Mm.
But they don't just happen automatically.
Hmm.
It takes intentional effort,
Okay.
it takes collaboration, and it takes a willingness to actually challenge the status quo.
Right.
And we all have a role to play in that,
Yeah.
whether it's, supporting local organizations,
Yeah.
advocating for policy changes, making conscious consumer choices, or even just having these conversations.
Right.
Raising awareness. We all have a part to play.
Yeah, you don't have to do everything,
Right.
but you can do something.
Exactly. Just start with one small thing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's volunteering at a local food bank or donating to an organization that's working on affordable housing
Right.
or having a conversation with a friend
Mm.
about these issues.
Hmm.
Every action counts.
I love that. And collectively, we can actually create a more just and prosperous future for everyone.
That's what it's all about.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into economic mobility and resilience. We hope you found it informative
Yeah, thanks for having me.
and inspiring. And, be sure to check out the show notes for links to the Atlanta Fed's research and resources, as well as info on some of those organizations that you can support that we talked about. Until next time, keep diving deep.